Hello, everybody, and welcome in today. My name is Ronisha Williams, and I'm going to be presenting today on my athlete case study. And we're going to be talking about a professional skater named Mogi Train. And we're going to kind of get more into this case study. But I would like to say I've never worked with a professional skater or even like no one. So it's kind of exciting to do this presentation and this case study because I didn't know nothing about skating beforehand, but now I do. So let's go ahead and get into the back. Okay. Like I was saying, let's go ahead and get into the background. So a little bit about Mogi's history is that there was no weight history provided previously, but I was able to calculate out an ideal body weight and a BMI. So Mogi's ideal body weight is about 190 pounds with a BMI of 26.7. And then for Mogi's weight range, I gave 190 to about 210 pounds. And then a little bit about Mogi's medical and injury history. So medically, Mogi was diagnosed with prediabetes in his late 20s or in their late 20s. And then they kind of just like worked and started watching their carb intake to help decrease that. They also have a family history of type 2 diabetes mellitus. And then they went about seeing a dietitian for eating disorders, specifically ARFID. And then some injuries that Mogi also has is some stress injuries in the joint areas, so in the knees, the wrists, things like that. Currently, Mogi is supplementing with a protein supplement, athletic greens, and then a men's daily multivitamin. And then lastly, the medications for Mogi is Keppra for epilepsy. Okay, and then for just a little bit currently about Mogi's training, exercise, and nutrition is that Mogi is currently training about 5 to 6 times a week. There's the upcoming qualifications for X Games. That will be taking place in about 3 months for Mogi. And so right now they've started to train. And they typically will train either by themselves with their coworkers or kind of while they're training other people and like teaching other people where they work at. And then for any other food preferences, well, this one's really not food preference, but Mogi's allergic to peanuts. So pretty much avoiding all things that have peanuts in them. And then Mogi dislikes a lot of vegetables except for carrots, cucumbers without the skin, and then any raw red bell peppers. And a lot of this is due to Mogi's textural aversions. So Mogi is not about trying adventurous foods, crazy different foods like sushi, things like that. And it's also not really into trying out like any foods that have like a gooey-ish texture to them. And so some of the current nutrition and performance goals that Mogi currently has is one, Mogi wants to qualify for those X Games, and on top of that, they're also partnered with a skateboarding company, and so just making sure that they can maintain their performance and nutrition for those two things currently right now. And then also we had previously talked about like eating during competitions and just kind of what that looks like for Mogi. And so we're going to talk about that more in our nutrition recommendations part, but just wanted to make note of that as well. Now getting a little bit more into the nutrition recommendations. I would like to just say right off the bat, there are like no nutrition recommendations for skateboarders, specifically professional skateboarders, even like roller skating, ice skating, snowboarding, like I guess what you could consider like extreme sports or like skating sports in general. There are like no nutrition recommendations out there for them, like specifically to them that you can just look up and go based off of. And so a lot of my recommendations nutritionally come from combining somewhat endurance athletes and their recommendations, and then also a little bit of strength athletes and their recommendations. And so I would just like to say there's very limited information, and we need more nutrition recommendations for skateboarding because it was very difficult to find it. And I'm like, wow, a huge gap for some of our athletes. A lot of different sports, like the ones I just named, don't really have many recommendations, or there's just like reviews done over them, not really primary research. So, kind of to get started, the overall calories that I provided was about 3,400 to 3,600 kcals a day for Mogi. And so this is kind of based off of that high intensity, short duration endurance sport. Because for skateboarders, their rounds are typically, they'll either have like 2 to 3 rounds and they're only lasting about 45 seconds. But, within the span of a skateboarder, they are performing tricks and doing jumps and this and that. So it's kind of like continuously like go, 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 high intensity because they're being timed. And so like even if they're like falling off the skateboard, they got to get back up and get back on it. So that's why I kind of chose those. That's why I kind of chose like the high intensity aspect of it. And so for the overall caloric range, I used the Mifflin and Cunningham equations to just give me kind of a rough estimate of the needs of Mogi. And so originally the range was a little bit higher than 3,600, but I decided to decrease it slightly just to make it more attainable for Mogi to follow, as well as just making it more attainable, but still keeping in mind that Mogi is training and in like a competitive season, at least like for the next 3 months and probably a little bit after qualify, and then be back right in it again for the actual competition to come. And so I still wanted to make sure Mogi was getting enough calories per day. And so for the carbs, it's about 6 grams per kilograms. Our protein is about 1.3 grams per kilogram. And then our fat is about 600 calories per day / 17%, which I think is about 0.7 grams per kilogram. And so for the carb recommendations, I chose to use the grams per kilogram that's based on the intensity and duration. And so like I said before, high intensity, short duration. And then with this in mind, I chose it when I was calculating like for the carbohydrates for the 3,400 and 3,600, I just kind of chose to go with 3,500. So it's like right in the middle. And that kind of gives a little leeway for Mogi to be under or a little bit over. And me as well when calculating the carbs, proteins, and fats. And so for the protein ranges, I used the numbers for endurance athletes because I feel like they were more appropriate for Mogi and skateboarding, just kind of in general, while also just staying within that recommended range. And then fat was calculated from our carbs and proteins. The next part is about our water and electrolytes. So, I know that like as a base recommendation for hydration, it's about 3.7 liters. Yeah, because it's almost a gallon for males. And so I use that one to kind of fit it with Mogi. And so when it comes to right before providing hydration, I did the 6 milliliters per kilogram, which gives you about 573 milliliters. And that's a few hours prior to like him training or competition, which it might also go up. The water is really just like a baseline estimation because I wasn't able to really talk to Mogi more about their hydration. And so that's like one of the questions, counseling questions I would ask next time if we met, is to just kind of ask more about their hydration, how do they stay hydrated, different things like that. And so I think being able to talk more with them, their baseline recommendations can increase, just depending on like their needs, how they feeling, different things like that. And so one of the articles that I found by James et al., they noted that when endurance athletes perform in the heat, and they start off hypohydrated, their performance is impaired. And so I just wanted to make note of this, that it is important for us to properly make sure, or it is important for us to make sure that athletes we work with are properly hydrated beforehand. And not just like during exercise or like right after exercise, but even like before they're exercising, just to make sure that they're performing at their optimal levels. And then for the supplementations, I kept both the protein powder, the men's daily vitamin, and then the AG1 supplement, which is a green superfood supplement. So it helps, it gives people I think 2 servings of both fruits and vegetables. Um, and so I kept that in there, and we'll kind of go in this a little bit more in like the meal day, the 1 day simple meal plan. But just really quick, I kept that in there because of the different textural of food aversions that Mogi has. Um, from the previous 24-hour recall, it didn't seem like they were intaking enough food. And so just for like the beginning of like providing the meal plan, like working with Mogi, I didn't want to just be like, no supplements, take them all out and starting all over, and kind of like meeting Mogi where they're at, just to be like, okay, so I can see that you use the protein powder and then the green food supplement. And so kind of keeping that in there until we can get it where they're getting most of their food and nutrients from whole food specifically. Um, and then with the AG1 supplement, which again is the green superfood, I kept that one in there because Mogi doesn't like vegetables. And so it's still important for Mogi to be intaking vegetables and fruit and stuff. And so for right now, like I said, I'm just keeping that in there so that way we can eventually like kind of work Mogi out of that through continuous nutrition counseling and even reaching out to other disciplines. And then some of the micronutrient concerns that I had about Mogi was about vitamin D and calcium. And I specifically thought about those because I thought about Mogi's bone health. And so it's important since Mogi already has a history of joint stress injuries. And so just making sure that he's refueled and adequately nourished can help with recovery and preventing any of those injuries from coming back, because I think most of us know that sometimes when you get one injury, especially if it's in like your joints and stuff, and you're continuously performing those movements over and over, it's likely for them to come back. And so I just kind of put that there, not just for the joints, but also for bone health, because I don't know if y'all watch skateboarding. I literally had to look up videos about skateboarding to like see it. But like I said before, skateboarding is a mix between endurance and strength. And when you see them, they're like jumping off stairs, they're jumping off ramps. There's a little poles, on the ground that they're like jumping up and doing tricks off of. And because all of that is a part of skateboarding, there's sometimes very hard falls that come with it, and that can result in very like harsh injuries to the body, especially like just imagine your body continuously making contact with pavement and concrete like over and over. After a while, even if in the time like your body gets used to it as a skateboarder, over time that can do damage to our bones and stuff. And so just making sure that we're also properly taking care of our bodies, nutritionally, even thinking about our micronutrients like vitamin D and calcium. And then in addition, those nutrition recommendations between athletes and the general population when it comes to like our bone health, they're not that different, but I do think specific considerations need to be taken into account when we have athletes that put a lot of impact on their bones, because even like when they're jumping up in the air for skateboarding and doing tricks in the air, like they still have to come back down onto pavement. And I'm just thinking about the radiation of their body, like in the skateboard, like making contact with the pavement. And so just kind of like considering that for athletes as well. And then next, we're going to talk a little bit about the 1 day sample meal plan that I came up with for Mogi. It's we'll get right into it, actually. It's very like rough, but also something that could be followed by Mogi. And so this is based off of the 3,400 to 3,600 range. I tried to aim for about 3,500. I think the total calories for this are 3,453, so I'm a little bit like under the 3,500, but I also think it was realistic to be a little bit under, so that way Mogi could see like, hey, even though we're aiming for 3,500, it's still okay if you're in the 3,400 to 3,600 range. And so that's kind of why I left that one, why I left it all alone and didn't like try to add more food in. And so I also want to say that a lot of the sample foods that were chosen for this are kind of based off of Mogi's 24-hour dietary like recall that they did, because again, taking into consideration those textural aversions and not wanting to try adventurous foods, like I didn't want to put anything crazy on here, So I kind of want to stick with like, okay, what do they know? What do they like? Especially because they did mention that they're kind of like stuck in their ways of what they like. So it's kind of like, okay, how can I take what they already like and, eat and consume and put it into a meal plan where they're not like too far off their norm, but also like incorporating more foods in and kind of like filling up their meals for the day, like bulking them up a little bit. And so the timings for this one are just based on like a typical day, maybe even during training, but this probably would change for competitions because I know Mogi said that they're sometimes there for like 10 hours a day, even though they only perform for like 30 minutes. And so taking that into consideration. And so I also wanted to note to Mogi of like, maybe we can set alarms to help when it's time to eat. Probably like packing a lunch for some of these foods would be kind of easy. Like for lunch, it's a Chipotle style bowl. You can kind of pack that to go and it's fine. Because everything in the bowl could be eaten a little room temp cold. It doesn't have to be like piping hot. And just kind of like making it easier when it comes to like eating these foods outside the home, because I know a lot of times people struggle with especially if they struggle with eating foods throughout the day, as Mogi has mentioned to me before. It's kind of like it's hard when it's then a meal plan that they're supposed to follow, because it's like, okay, if I'm already struggling, how am I going to eat all of this food, So kind of just like talking with Mogi about like maybe packing a lunch or a meal and like prepping it beforehand, like even if it's just like individually prepping the fruit and the vegetables, just so that way it makes it easier for Mogi to like take and go. And so now just going over it a little bit, I spread out. So I have breakfast, a snack, lunch, a snack, dinner, and then a snack. And so I kind of spread the protein out throughout the day, just so that it wasn't all at like one time in the day, but you'll see that the protein is kind of spread throughout. And then let's see. Oh, for instance, for the PM snack, I use the green superfood in like a smoothie, because I know of the texture aversions. Like in addition, I kind of put that as a question to ask later of like, okay, can you tell me more about it? Like if you don't like the texture of some foods, would you mind them in a smoothie? Because I know sometimes like the texture can really get to people, but then it kind of depends on how you prepare it, how you cook it, and kind of changing that up and fixing it can still help. Like, okay, well, I can still consume bananas even though I don't like that they're mushy. You know what I'm saying? So that's what I kind of did. And then just kind of making sure that at almost every meal there was adequate protein, and then carbs spread throughout the day a little bit. And so that's just like a basic meal plan we got for Mogi. And then also like some other notes is that just making sure that, like I said, this is for like a regular day, but for like training days and competitions, making sure that Mogi at least like 4 hours before, the recommendation was about 3 to 4.5 grams per kilogram of carb specifically. And so just making sure that we're having that and just replenishing our carbs and protein throughout the day. Although fat is not really recommended to have it before and during exercise, or if you do, like just watching out for GI issues and stuff. And so just taking that into consideration, which I would be able to do further on once getting to know his competition schedule and more about their competition schedule and more about their training. And so next, we're going to go a little bit into the exercise routine and recommendations. All right. Look, we got a little skateboarder going. But Mogi has been skateboarding for about 25 years. They've been professional for about 12 of those years. And so, like I said before, it's a mix of endurance and strength combined training. Specifically, a lot of strength goes into their lower body, which helps them to perform different tricks and stuff. And then they're currently, for the X Games competitions, training 5 to 6 days a week. I thought about adding in about 1 to 2 times a week, adding in some strength training, just to kind of help, with the strength, because depending on what category Mogi will be performing in, that can determine the intensity levels. And so, like I said, they're performing tricks and flips using railings, ramps, stairs, all to do that. And so they need a lot of their lower body strength to perform those tricks, kind of making skateboarding an overall like full body sport workout. And so also it's important that like strength training can help with that bone, like maintaining or strengthening bones due to the impacts of skating. And so just kind of incorporating that in there. And then for the exercise routines, they need to have that adequate fluid before, during, after, as I mentioned before. And so I think getting to work more with Mogi, we could determine like what that looks like for Mogi on a training basis, day to day. And then one thing that I just wanted to make note of is that the fluid intake might be the same for trainings and competitions, but I don't know if y'all have ever been at competitions like all day or something. Sometimes they're a lot and you just have to keep fueling your body with hydration. And so for competitions, they may increase for Mogi. But like I said, just working with them to find out more. And then I also want to note that when it comes to like the meal plan and exercise, like with working with Mogi, I want to be able to fit them together so that they kind of flow. Because as you can see before, with the meal plan, it's very like kind of like structure. It's not by time, but it is like structure, like breakfast, lunch, dinner, snack, right? And so sometimes when you're training at competitions and stuff, sometimes you're not even hungry to eat. And so I think that's why like having the snacks like a protein shake or a smoothie can kind of help with like still consuming nutrients but not even like feeling like you're full or like eating a full-on meal. And so kind of just keeping that in mind. And so the meal plan, in addition, like if Mogi was to go back from the competitive state and the training state, they could still use that meal plan. We might just work on decreasing our caloric intake or something like that. Just because he's not, or they're not using that much energy anymore. And so, yeah. And then the next part I want to go a little bit more into is just like other considerations for Mogi overall and like who Mogi could work with in addition, just improving the nutrition intake. And so the first thing that I had noted is that working with an athletic trainer. So like I said before, due to those stress injuries already endured, an athletic trainer or a physical therapist can make sure that Mogi is still performing like those adequate stretches and warm-ups. And just helping decrease the ability of Mogi experiencing those injuries again before, during, or after the competition. And so this also helps with recovery strategies after intense competitions because, as noted by Braun Trocchio, that study found that many male endurance athletes don't use many recovery strategies, which we also learned about in class. Could be like using saunas or cold immersion therapy, different things like that, or just like stretching, making sure the nutrition is good, resting up, getting enough sleep because sleep is important. But males, when compared to female athletes, don't use those strategies as much during training. And, they might use them more during competition, but it's still important to note that even during training, you still have to make sure your body is recovering. And so I think working with an athletic trainer can just help with that, and also just helping to avoid any unnecessary like stress injuries that could push Mogi back some in his training. And then the next one is just continuously improving nutrition intake, which we've kind of already talked about, and just continuously like asking Mogi questions, seeing what changes, what works, what doesn't. Like if the meal plan feels like it's too much, we might have to decrease that caloric intake until we can work our way up to that. Or if hydration is a very big issue and Mogi is like, no, I do not drink no water at all, then it's kind of like, okay, well, how can we get more water in throughout the day? Either whether you are like noticing like, yes, I'm drinking water, or if it's like, okay, we have, I don't know, like a water infused drink, if that's Mogi's jam, then we could do like a little water infused drink so that way they're still able to get their water in. And then the last thing that I noted was working with a speech therapist for food aversions. I know that, I don't know if people think about speech therapists a lot, but I know just from my experience in working with some that they're really helpful from kids up until like adults, grown people, older people, just kind of helping with changing and desensitizing people from certain food aversions, or just helping them like work through it. And so I think it would just help so that Mogi can enjoy a bigger variety of food, adding some more fruits and veggies in so that Mogi can increase the nutrients that he does need to perform and excel in his sport. And so I think just giving that a try could be nice because it could help. And if Mogi is like, yeah, no, I prefer what I'm already eating, let's just leave that alone, then obviously that's fine. But I think it would be nice just as an option to just try speech therapy and working with them. Yeah. And then the next part is my nutrition counseling questions. So I just kind of asked Mogi about budget, how comfortable they are cooking in the kitchen, what they have access to in the kitchen. Because people, they might have a stovetop, but not an oven. You know, or the new biggest thing is air fryers, which I have one, get you one. But people might use air fryers over the stove and the oven because that's how they prefer their food cooked. So just kind of learning more about that. Learning more about what they spend on cooking, what does prepping and preparing your food look like from the day to day, week to week. Just talking more about the food aversions, what are their current nutrition and upcoming competition goals that they have in case they've changed since the last time we met, and just making sure that they stay up to date so that they meet Mogi's needs. And then again, like I said, talking about hydration and then just trying to schedule those meals out and seeing like what has worked before when it comes to scheduling meals, what hasn't worked, how would they like to go about trying it this time, and different things like that. And so I just want to say thank you, everybody, for joining me. Hope you all have an amazing rest of your semester. And yeah, thanks for talking about Mogi with me. And in my references. Okay, bye, y'all.